President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. You're all very welcome to Kerry County Museum today. My name is Claudia Kohler. I'm the Education Officer of the museum, and I'm honored to be your Master of Ceremonies tonight. Now, first of all, I'm very honored, but I'm also very nervous, so please forgive me if I stumble across a couple of lines. I would like to welcome you all here to this very special occasion, the visit of the President of Ireland to Kerry, and also to launch our major exhibition, Roger Casement in Kerry, A Revolutionary Journey. You're all very welcome. Before we get started, I just have to go through this with you. Please switch off your mobile phones if you haven't done that already. And I know we always know a couple of people and the phone goes off in the middle of the ceremony. So please put it on silent or switch it off. And then secondly, we just have to have a little look at the fire exits here. So there's two of them. One is on this side, leading to the back of the building, and one is down this way, the very same way that you came in. So now that we have this out of the way, I would like to ask the Mayor of Kerry, Pat McCarthy, to address the audience.
Thank you, Ellen. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the President here this evening at a very, very special event and period in the museum's continuous development. It is so important that you are here, President, and your lovely wife, Sabina, because it is such a historic occasion. 2016, 100 years after so many different important developments in the history of Ireland. Earlier at Banner, we commemorated the arrival there 100 years ago today of a small boat containing Roger Casement and two of his friends, Captain Robert Monteith and Daniel Bailey. On Saturday next, we commemorate Captain Monteith out in Ballymakelliget, where I live myself, and where he stayed for quite a particular time after Banner. Here at the museum we now unveil, which is a wonderful and comprehensive exhibition on the very significant, important figure that Roger Casement was. And we've heard today from the President himself and from many, many more speakers how important he was. And as I said to the CEO, Myra, we'll all be educated, and hopefully our younger people in particular will be more educated and really appreciate the importance of that period in our history. This will be the first ever major exhibition in Ireland about Roger Casement, and as such it will provide a significant opportunity for the general public to broaden and deepen their understanding of the figure that this great man was, and indeed the important period that he existed in. It will bring together artifacts that have never been seen in public before. For instance, objects used in the evidence at Casement's trial, which are on loan to the museum here. And the important ones are from the Crime Museum in Scotland. That's Scotland Yard, sorry. The exhibition will display artifacts and photographs collected by Casement in Africa and South America, which are, I'm sure some of you had a chance to look at. Casement's brief time in Kerry had indeed profound repercussions for the people he encountered. Many of those who were brought to England to testify in his trial And for some of those people, their lives were never the same again. Telling this story in Kerry means that the global and national intersect with the local, reveals the dramatic effect that revolutionary periods had on the lives of ordinary people in Ireland, ordinary men and women, and indeed, I'm sure the same applied to other countries and how it affected their people. I want to pay a very warm tribute to Helen O'Connell, the curator of the museum here, and the staff for putting this wonderful exhibition together. The work has gone on behind the scenes in recent weeks, deserves to be acknowledged and appreciated, and it's very well done. Would you mind reading And can I tell you that in some of their cases, it's more than more than a few weeks. There's a lot of research gone in, and a lot of very hard work gone in behind the scenes to acquire and collect what they have done. I hope that many people will visit the exhibition over the next few months, and that they will celebrate and learn about the life and times of Roger Casement. And finally, I would like to say, and I suppose repeat, too, in 2016 is such a valuable exercise, and I think you, President, you mentioned today, is bringing information and commemorations before us. Going to meet them all.
President of Ireland.
August, it's more a pleasure to me. All as we're coming, this is, I think, my fourth time speaking about matters in relation to Roger Casement in Kerry, and what a great pleasure to how pleased I am that the public are with no August and faint sense of rise in self-respect and in distinction, and also I think it encourages people to engage with the different multi-layered versions of different events in a better way. I've spoken about it in Northern Ireland very much in terms of the ethics of memory. I've spoken about it in different parts of the country. And when I use a phrase like, when I say a hospitality of narratives, put more simply, this is the notion of the corn in Irish, of you leaving one story on top of another until you have, if you like, the nearest thing to a it's always changing because new circumstances become available. It's a great pleasure to have been asked to come to Kerry and to be part of your commemorations of your connection with the life of Roger Casement. I think that Roger Casement is important not only to all of us in relation to the history of Ireland, and it's a very interesting connection he has with Ireland. First of all, I think, and I haven't spoken, I think, today about his early background, which is being born into a Protestant belief system in Sandymount. He's moving at a very young age to back to what was perceived as the ancestral home in Northern Ireland. And he would always regard himself as an Ulster man. But there is also something else that I think in another time is his connection with. He works with his uncle from 15 years of age. He's working actually in the company very, very early on. I think that if people, when they come to want to deal with the full complexity of Roger Casement's life, and I think Maria Vargas Llosa in El Sueño del Celt, The Dream of the Celt, has made an attempt in that regard. But I think there's not more journeys to be done as well in relation to, for example, what I referred to in one of the earlier speeches today, the breaches in intimacy that are involved with the loss of his parents, movement to Northern Ireland, the whole question of life in Liverpool. And then there is, in turn, what will come later, the whole business of, if you like, being put into other cultures, and the use of different instruments of recording to try and remind oneself to, if you like, excite the human temperament. Few figures in Irish history have become as internationally celebrated on so many occasions as Roger Casement. And it's very, very interesting that I remember as a child in County Clare, in Irish houses. You'll see it there with Mitchell's Jane Journal and others. And this is what people collected. You'll see in the exhibition here, speech in the dock of Roger Casement, circulated for twopence, 2 pennies in the whole thing, which had a huge circulation. And we had the benefit today of listening to an absolutely splendid reading of extracts from Casement's speech. I think that today Casement is beginning to be absolutely become a star after his death in South America as a result of the massive circulation of El Sueño del Celt. Mario Vargas Llosa's book is selling all over South America. I think that means, because of course Roger Casement is important to the whole history of humanity for his extraordinary work, the photographs, which really may be uncomfortable to see, but people should look at them and never forget the consequences of them. And these are the photographs of mutilated youngsters from the Congo. He is the first great whistleblower against imperialism. He is the person who sets out as an employee and sets off and discovers, not just when we read it academically, what is being plundered, but what are the consequences of the insatiable greed of plunder, and the huge distinction which all youngsters coming should recognize between what one might call a civilization of sufficiency, which is what people need, and an insatiable greed which needs to be fed at the cost of mutilation of the human body and of killings. And I didn't, as I'm coming to the end of before I go back to Dublin, I'm very cognizant that I never say any of these things just to make speeches and whatever, and this isn't in my speech. But there's one of the companies at the moment which was in Ecuador that has put millions of gallons of poison into the river system of Ecuador, and which has a fine of $16.9 billion that it refuses to pay. So the work, what in fact Casement objected against in Putumayo and elsewhere, is going on today. And it is going on again through the abuse of power and people claiming immunity from international law. There are others who, I'm sure, will fall on this, and that is why this exhibition is very important. You see, if you like, what it tells you of this restlessness that was in Casement's mind. Your connection with it here in his drawings of McKenna's Fort, now Casement's Fort in Ardfert, on Good Friday 1916, is so moving. I have just come from Ardfert, where I read out that passage that he wrote from his prison to his sister, describing what it was like to wake up covered, and to be wet, and to be listening to the larks singing in the morning, and saying at least to be home in Ireland again, because he always identified himself as Irish. And indeed, it is very important that in relation to the infamous trial, that of course that would be one of the principles of the defence, as to the trial of treason, that he was actually, or didn't regard himself as having committed an offence of treason within the realm, defining himself as Irish. I think that we have been very fortunate as we prepared for 2016 that we now have quite some very fine new young historians, and I know that people like Angus Mitchell and Geoffrey Dudgeon. I've read most recently Angus Mitchell's Berlin Diary, and I understand they're going to be with us this evening. But also I think I've been speaking in Ardfert about the price paid by the local families who were forced to go and give evidence against Roger Casement. It's a great, great pleasure to know that relatives of Roger Casement and Captain Monteith and others have been able to come to Kerry and join you for these celebrations. And it is a great, wonderful gesture of cooperation between our heritage institutions that we're able to exchange materials. And I do want to pay tribute to Helen and to say thank you for pushing this exhibition that I have seen together. Obviously, one of the focal points of the exhibition is the small wooden flat-bottomed boat. And I want to congratulate you on getting a wonderful controversy going in Kerry again. And I think that this boat, and you're assembling evidence with diligence, but I think that this boat, which Robert Monteith and Daniel Bailey, one of the 56 he recruited in Germany, used to come ashore. Not very successfully, because I think from what we know from that they capsized, and it is a miracle he made it at all. But I think that the frailty of that boat symbolises the extraordinary imagination and commitment as well of the people who planned the Easter Rising. Sometimes people look at the Easter Rising and they begin from a certain rather narrow utilitarian concept and said, well, could it have won, and could they have done it differently, and so forth. But frankly, what is important, I think, is out of their frailties and out of the abstract way in which they construct what they were willing to do. And it is what people were willing to do for what they believed in that I think that their idealism is located. I know that your boat, which you will say is the authentic boat, is on loan from the Imperial War Museum, and I want to wish the boat that's in the North Kerry Museum every success as well. And I think the debate and controversy about matters of heritage are very important, as long as the heritage comes first. When I was Minister for the Heritage more than 20 years ago, sometimes I think someone said to me that heritage would never catch on in Ireland. And I also many times thanked for the different superstitions that had protected so much over the years. But I think it's wonderful that things are coming on so well. I think that this boat that we've just seen inside was presented to King George V in June 1916. I rather doubt myself that he would have welcomed it with such enthusiasm. For after all, in King George V's own notes, there is his great disappointment at the failure, or his failure to convince Unionists that they might be reasonable in relation to Home Rule. I remember discussing this with one of the descendants of King George V, but I'm not free to discuss that at the moment. Up to the present day, another event that I think I have discussed briefly during the day is, of course, the famous German relationship, and of course it's in the proclamation, our allies in Europe. I think it's very important, the passage that I quoted from Casement himself, in just where I've come from in Ardfert, to say that this putative battalion that Casement was putting together would have been for the defence of Ireland, and also it would have not been ever under German command for a German project. That's in Casement's own writing. I think as well it's very, very important, and it's for another day, to know that the defence forces, they are they're here in Ireland. We have always called them defence forces, which is very different from an imperial expeditionary force, for example. I think that Roger Casement and that seeking of German support, when you look at Joseph Mary Plunkett's relationship to that project as well, it was never going to work. I've already made reference to the fact that the chaos that ensued, if you like, the accident on the way to the liaison between the different forces who were to bring the arms ashore is one part of it. But also, of course, there was also the breakdown in relationships between Roger Casement and those who were also dealing with John Devoy in the United States. Anyway, that's for another day, but I think let's think about this exhibition from outside. When you see the rubber baskets that are on display there, they were used by the people of the Free State of the Congo, who were forced to collect wild rubber for the benefit of King Leopold II of Belgium and his favourite concessionaires, and who were routinely submitted to the most brutal forms of atrocities. I should say to you, because I have been speaking on the topic very recently again, and concerned as I am about the future of Europe, it is one of the obstacles for defining Europe into the future, those of us who are very much in favour of the European Union, is the reluctance in European member countries to face the facts of their own history. Not for any, there's no reason for, there's no one looking for payments or anything, just for the acknowledgement of the enormity of what was done in the name of the different empires and their relationship to Africa. No more than all of us who revise our different histories from time to time, Europe one day will have to face up to that as well. And it is one of the great gaps. I refer to it as one of the great lacunas in history, and it's something from which we would all benefit. Roger Casement's report on the atrocities of the Congo was published in 1904. I've said it was one of the first great whistleblowing exercises. In his conversations with Joseph Conrad, Conrad tells us he could tell you things I have tried to forget, things I never did know. And as Angus Mitchell and other historians would point out as well, it is probably, Conrad may have said to Roger Casement, you should have been the author of The Heart of Darkness, could have been a co-author of The Heart of Darkness. But whatever gift of fame The Heart of Darkness gave to Joseph Conrad, for other reasons associated with perhaps his own marginality in British society and his own experience of Polish relationships with Germany, he was reluctant, he wouldn't sign the petition seeking clemency for Roger Casement. I'm delighted that you have inside them one of the most neglected figures in Irish history, Eva Gore-Booth, who is Ransom's partner as well. Eva Gore-Booth was one of the people who didn't know Casement, but attended the trial and immediately set about organising a petition for his release. And she organised some of the leading intellectuals writing in English to write, including, of course, George Bernard Shaw. The exhibition, when you look at the drum beats, the beaters from the Putumayo, I think that is very interesting about how Casement came to be writing about the Indians and in Putumayo. It's very much he came through the Barbadians. I remember myself when I visited Montserrat for the first time, it was because Barbadians were British subjects and who were being abused in relation to the company that is his first entry point. But it is very, very clear that one of the reluctances to face, if you like, Casement's name originally is Casement took enormous risks in exposing the activities of the company and to the perpetrators of atrocities against the people of Putumayo. Reading the journal that Roger Casement wrote during that journey, you have to be moved by the profound compassion Casement felt for the Indians, such empathy which was exceptional in a diplomat of his epoch. In fact, it is a great issue in relation to diplomacy as to when should diplomats, if you like, break ranks because of a great tragedy. Casement's empathy was such that make his life uncomfortable in the Foreign Service. But he's writing back home to his taskmasters, and this is what he says. All that was once the Indians has been taken away from him. His forest, his home, his domestic affections, even nothing that God and nature gave him is indeed left to him, save his fine, healthy body, capable of supporting terrible fatigue, his shapely limbs and fair, clear skin, marred by the lash and scarred by execrable blows. His manhood has been lashed and branded out of him. I look at the big, soft-eyed faces, averted and downcast, and I wonder where that heavenly power can be for so long allowed these beautiful images of himself to be thus defaced and shamed. One looks then at the oppressors, vile cutthroat faces, grim, cruel lips and sensual mouths, bulging eyes and lustful, men incapable of good. And it is this handful of murderers who, in the name of civilization and of a great association of English gentlemen, are the possessors of so much gentler and better flesh and blood. I think these are very moving words, but you can see even so long ago what an exposition there were of the cruelties of colonization. And that is why commemorations like this today, here in this beautiful region of Kerry, I think they are an important opportunity to go back and engage with Casement in his totality and renew our connection with international affairs. They're an invitation to appreciate fully the motivation which led this extraordinary Irishman who lost his father so young, who moved to Northern Ireland, who worked so early in Liverpool, who came back, who attended the Feis and the Glens of Antrim. I think when you think that as he's thinking about this, he is saying the worst thing of all is in fact the degradation you inflict on people when you suppress their culture. And it is for that reason, that is the reason, even right at the very end of his life, he is struggling to learn the Irish language. And he tells Stopford Greenley at the end he won't have time now to learn Irish. But also there's all of this, I think. Here is an Irishman leading the thinking that opposes global trade strategies that have such cruel consequences. Strategies that are based on the seizure of land, the appropriation of natural resources, the violent exploitation of indigenous people without any regard for the most fundamental rights. And my first evening here in Kerry, just last night, I saw a film which is really about Mother Nature and Gaia, as you might say, or as they would say in South America, Mater Tierra Madre, Mother Earth. This was something that was very, very much there in Casement's thinking. Casement regarded commerce as a failure in relation to its notion of civilizing primitive peoples, understanding that this appetite for wild rubber, that during that first year of globalization, it was underpinned by the most widespread violations and the human dignity of laborers. He asked unsettling questions about power, about the rules guiding foreign policy and international trade. And the voice of Roger Casement on his way back to London after his journey through the Putumayo, he says, has our modern commercialism, our latter-day company promoting, whose motto would seem to be that a director may pocket the proceeds without perceiving the process, no part in this enterprise of horror and shame. The Aranas, he's describing those who were the owners of the company, the administrators in place. The Aranas brought their wares, 50,000 Indian slaves, to market in London, not be it observed to Madrid or to Lima, but to London. And they found Englishmen and English finance prepared, without question, to accept their Putumayo estates and their numerous native labourers at a glance at the annually increasing output of rubber. Nothing beyond that was needed. The rubber was there. How it was produced, out of what hell of human suffering, no one knew, no one asked, no one suspected, can it be no one cared. And when finally his report is being debated in London, the directors of the company, some from the titled people from the highest echelons of British society, said they didn't know what was going on in their name. These are questions which I believe continue to challenge us today. We have no excuse for saying we don't know what is going on. As I speak this evening, there are people claiming immunity from the international fines that have been placed upon them for pouring millions of poison into the water of Ecuador and into countries in the region. These are questions that I've said continue to challenge us. I think that we must draw from Casement's line, from his passionate defence of the human dignity of those who are the victims of history, and his commitment to the cause of freedom in Ireland and abroad. And we're invited to make our own response today in this interconnected world on a fragile planet, for I think to really ask, how can we peacefully and in our discourse make sure that we get responsibility from those multinationals I have mentioned who seek immunity for their actions into the river systems of country and who have walked away, changed the name of the company, refused to deal with the people who are affected. Dear friends, I'm finished. May I conclude by saying this, that Roger Casement's last mission in the name of freedom, which brought him here to Kerry, was a mission which was beset by misfortune, some would say, being able to listen towards some kind of healing, where we will be able to bring it upon ourselves to say, we forgive, and we forgive the things that so that we may be able to live in the present and move on in the future. And I believe that that is what we must do. But once again, mar focus is mean lamaro on privilege of Kerry and you. May I say how delighted I have been to be here today. And I want to congratulate all of those who've contributed to this exhibition and their sponsorship. Tris Liam Lishan Riraho, is Lishan Kushta, is Leidson Hag Ari Sulia, Erlone, Onaskimaka Taspont, Sir Foildun Galair, is Edson Chokik, I was the Sulam Gajokik Naslucha. I want to say to all of you who have ever who have been helping in this exhibition, all those wonderful people who have been contributing their scholarship and their new insights and analysis that enables us to recover this period. It is so timely and fitting to pay tribute to a great man of compassion and integrity, of vulnerability and fragility, and to have the courage in 2016 to engage with him totally in his fullness of his life in all its complexity. Is main lamaro ko sosa tom even shanu agus ka God live. And I want to say how pleased, and it is a privilege as President of Ireland to have been here and to join with you in your timely and fitting tribute to a great man of compassion and integrity who showed the courage of his convictions and, remember, gave his life for the Irish freedom that enables you and I to be here and me to be here to speak to you as President of Ireland. Thank you very much.
For this touching speech. Can I just say that what you were saying about the level of engagement that is happening right now, Artford National School, they made a brilliant short film on the school's iPad on the landing of Roger Casement. The children reenacted it. We had it here on display for weeks, and I just want to say I would love Roger Casement to know that even though no one recognized him 100 years ago when he arrived in Bannerstrand, today there isn't a school child in the county that does not know about him. And that makes me personally very happy. Thank you very much. I now would like to ask the Chief Executive of Kerry County Council, Maura Morel, to make a presentation to the President on behalf of Kerry County Council and the people of Kerry.